There are things that seem to carry a shadow behind them. They beckon with brilliance, power, or mystery, but behind their surface lies trouble, tragedy, and curses that have been whispered about for centuries. From jewels that bring death to tombs that know no rest, today we uncover history's most cursed artifacts. Black granite sarcophagus from Alexandria. In 2018, workers at a construction site in Alexandria stumbled upon a massive object buried at a depth of almost 5 meters. When archaeologists cleared away a layer of earth, they found a huge black granite sarcophagus, monolithic, without inscriptions or decorations, completely devoid of signs of its owner. Its size and weight were astonishing, almost 3 meters long, 1.5 meters wide, about 2 meters high, and weighed over 30 tons. The real mystery was that such sarcophagi were usually accompanied by writings, hieroglyphs, symbols of power, or religious rites. This one was completely empty on the outside, as if it was deliberately hiding everything inside. When the discovery became known, rumors and speculations flared up all over the world. Many believed that the sarcophagus could belong to Alexander the Great, since it was in Alexandria that the trace of his tomb disappeared after 2,000 years of unsuccessful searches. Others believed that a curse similar to the one associated with Tutankhamun's tomb could be hidden inside. The atmosphere of tension grew, and archaeologists had to act with caution. Heavy machinery was needed to lift the lid. When the sarcophagus was opened, a suffocating smell of decay and stale water that had accumulated over the centuries burst forth from within. Instead of one honorary mummy, there were 3 skeletons inside, piled haphazardly on top of each other, 2 male and 1 female, with one of the skulls showing signs of trauma, indicating a violent death. All this only added to the dark aura of the find. The sarcophagus material itself also looked unusual. Black granite was mined far from Alexandria, in the Aswan region, and the delivery of such a giant in ancient times required incredible efforts and resources. Why waste them on an unmarked burial? Why were 3 bodies in one sarcophagus, and without any signs of honor? Scientists have suggested that these could have been representatives of a noble family who died during the period of unrest and were buried secretly to hide their identity. But there is no evidence to support this version. Rumors of a curse spread instantly. People wrote online that the opening of the sarcophagus would bring disaster, that misfortunes would follow archaeologists. The Egyptian authorities even issued an official statement calling for people not to believe in fantastic stories, but the public did not calm down. Many believed that the granite sarcophagus was created not for honors, but to imprison something dark and dangerous, and that by opening it, people violated an ancient prohibition. Today, the sarcophagus is kept in a museum, its discovery documented, and analyses of the bones and water published in scientific journals. But the mystery remains. Who was inside? Why did such an expensive sarcophagus not have a name? And did the deceased really want to be forgotten forever? Ring of Atlantis. Among the many legends about mysterious ancient objects, the Ring of Atlantis occupies a special place. Its history began at the beginning of the 20th century, when the French archaeologist Marcel Charles discovered an unusual artifact during excavations in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. The ring was made of sandstone, had a rough shape, and was covered with strange geometric symbols that did not resemble hieroglyphs or the ornaments of known cultures. It is believed that its origin is not associated with Egypt, but with the legendary Atlantis, a lost civilization that possessed knowledge and technology inaccessible to modern man. From the moment of its discovery, the ring was surrounded by a bad reputation. Charles and his colleagues claimed that the object allegedly possessed protective powers, capable of protecting its owner from misfortunes and illnesses. However, very soon, the rumors took on a sinister character. There are many testimonies in history that the ring not only protects, but also brings death to those who try to use it for selfish purposes. Several archaeologists working near the find died under strange circumstances, and rumors of a curse began to grow, acquiring new details. In the 1920s, the artifact came into the possession of French explorer Howard Carter, the same man who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. Many of his team are known to have died mysteriously shortly after, and although Carter himself lived a long life, some believe that it was the Atlantean ring that protected him from the curse of the pharaoh that killed the others. Since then, the ring has acquired a reputation as a powerful but treacherous talisman. In the 20th century, the object fell into the hands of esotericists and researchers of the occult sciences. They called it a tool that amplifies energy and allows one to control invisible flows. Some claimed that the ring is capable of causing foresight and revealing hidden knowledge, while others said that it feeds on the life force of its owner, slowly destroying his body and mind. The ring's design itself is of particular interest. The geometric figures resemble ancient magical symbols that combine elements of sacred geometry and astronomical signs. Researchers of occult sciences are confident that this ornament was created with a specific purpose, to concentrate and direct the energy hidden in the stone. Today, the Ring of Atlantis is kept in a private collection, and its exact location is kept secret. Some argue that modern copies sold in markets as amulets do not carry real power, and only copy the appearance of the ancient artifact. But there are those who believe that even a simple repetition of the pattern can awaken dormant forces and attract trouble. Either way, the story of the Atlantean ring remains a warning. Some ancient secrets should not become a toy in the hands of people thirsty for power and immortality. After all, what was created to protect or hold back the dark forces can turn into a terrible curse for anyone who decides to test its power. The cursed spear of destiny. Among the most mysterious artifacts in human history, a special place is occupied by the spear known as the Spear of Destiny, or the Spear of Longinus. Legend has it that it was with this weapon that a Roman soldier pierced the body of the crucified Christ to make sure of his death. Since then, the spear has acquired a mystical aura of power and curse, influencing the fates of rulers and entire empires. The first mention of the relic dates back to the early Middle Ages, when the spear ended up in Constantinople. Emperor Constantine considered it a symbol of divine patronage, and in subsequent centuries, the object passed from hand to hand, accompanying great upheavals. In the 12th century, the spear was transferred to Europe, where it became an object of worship and political intrigue. Monarchs swore allegiance to it, believing that its possession granted not only power, but also invincibility on the battlefield. However, along with hope, the artifact also brought horror. According to the chronicles, each owner of the spear faced a tragic ending. Emperor Henry IV, who held the relic in his hands, was defeated in the war and died in exile. Frederick Barbarossa drowned during the Crusade, never being able to complete his plans. Even powerful dynasties that possessed the spear eventually collapsed, as if under the influence of an unknown force. The Spear of Destiny gained particular attention in the 20th century, when it became known that Adolf Hitler was fascinated by it. In 1912, he visited a museum in Vienna where the relic was kept and stood for a long time in front of the display case, fascinated by its appearance. He later claimed that it was this spear that was destined to make him the ruler of the world. When the Nazis came to power, the artifact was confiscated and transported to Nuremberg, where Hitler kept it under guard, believing it to be the source of his strength. But history developed differently. In April 1945, when U.S. troops entered Nuremberg, the spear ended up in their hands, and exactly a few hours later, Hitler committed suicide in Berlin. Whether this is a coincidence or a confirmation of an ancient curse is a question that has no clear answer. Many researchers are sure that the Führer truly believed in the mystical power of the artifact, and the loss of the relic became a symbolic end for him. There is also a darker version. The spear does not so much bring good luck as it subjugates the fate of its owner. It allows one to ascend to the pinnacle of power, but then brings one down, destroying everything that was created. This cyclicality explains the endless series of misfortunes that accompanied all who dared to hold the relic in their hands. Today, the spear is kept in Vienna in the Hofburg Treasury. Tourists can see it behind glass, but access to the object itself is strictly limited. Scientists argue whether this is really an authentic Roman warrior's spear or just a medieval copy surrounded by legends. But for believers and mystics, the origin is no longer important. What is important is that the artifact is associated with a long chain of tragedies and mysteries that are difficult to write off as simple coincidences. The Spear of Destiny has become a symbol of man's desire for power and a reminder of its price. Anyone who touches it has a chance at greatness, but also opens the door to their own destruction. And perhaps that is its true curse. It does not belong to man and was never meant to be in his hands. The tomb of Tamerlane and its curse. In the heart of Uzbekistan, in the ancient city of Samarkand, stands the Gur Amir Mausoleum, the final resting place of the great 14th century conqueror Timur, better known as Tamerlane. His name inspired fear in many countries, as his armies left behind burned cities and thousands of victims. But the story of his tomb is far more sinister, with legends of a deadly curse circulating for centuries around it. During his lifetime, Tamerlane ordered a majestic mausoleum to be built for himself. Inside the burial hall, his coffin was covered with a massive slab of dark green jade, so rare and expensive that its origin is shrouded in mystery. According to local legend, the slab was engraved with the words, "Whoever disturbs my peace will unleash a disaster upon the world more terrible than myself." These words were perceived not as decoration, but as a warning, as if the commander himself foresaw the fate of his tomb. For many centuries, the mausoleum stood untouched, but in June 1941, Soviet archaeologists led by Mikhail Gerasimov received an order to open the grave. The goal of the expedition was to study the remains of the great conqueror and reconstruct his appearance from the skull. Local residents and elders begged the archaeologists to abandon this idea, reminding them of the inscription and the ancient curse. But science and ambition prevailed. The expedition began excavations on June 19, 1941. That day, the sarcophagus was opened, and the researchers did indeed discover a skeleton with an injured leg, confirming the lameness mentioned in historical sources. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but at the same time, a frightening entry appeared in the expedition diary. There seemed to be a heaviness in the air, as if the mausoleum itself was resisting our intervention. The archaeologists felt a strange uneasiness, but continued their work. At around 2 days after the tomb was opened, on June 22, 1941, Germany went to war against the Soviet Union. For many, the coincidence was too terrible to be accidental. Locals claimed that Tamerlane's curse had come true. By opening his tomb, people had unleashed a disaster on the world, the bloodiest war in history. Rumors of the curse spread even among the military. It was said that Marshal Zhukov and Stalin were aware of these stories. And although this is not confirmed in official documents, it is known that in 1942, after heavy defeats at the front, Tamerlane's sarcophagus was closed again, with all Muslim rites. Just a few weeks later, the Red Army won its first major victory at Stalingrad, and many saw this as a direct consequence of the conqueror's return to his eternal rest. Since then, the Gur-Amir Mausoleum has become not only an architectural monument, but also a symbol of the mysterious power contained in ancient burials. Scientists explain the coincidence with simple facts. The war was prepared long before 1941, and any signs are just a figment of the imagination. However, it is difficult to deny that the coincidence of dates looks eerily accurate. Today, the mausoleum is open to tourists, but there is still an unsettling aura around it. Guides and caretakers are often asked if it is true that the sarcophagus remains cursed, and they answer, "It is better not to disturb it again." After all, the lesson of the past has shown that sometimes even the bravest hearts choose to respect ancient warnings. Tamerlane's tomb remains an example of how history and legend intertwine. For some, it's just a coincidence. For others, it's proof that the dead can indeed protect their peace. But in any case, this sarcophagus reminds us that sometimes it's better to leave a secret in silence than to risk awakening its power. Mask of Tutankhamun. Of all the ancient Egyptian treasures, there is no item more famous and at the same time more sinister than the golden mask of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. It has become a symbol of ancient Egypt and archaeology in general, but behind its radiant beauty lies a story that many call a curse. In November 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter and his expedition discovered the intact tomb of an 18th dynasty pharaoh in the Valley of the Kings. The discovery shocked the world. Inside were hundreds of objects, gold jewelry, chariots, statues of gods, and a sarcophagus containing the young ruler, who died a mysterious death at the age of about 19. The most impressive artifact was a burial mask made of 24 pounds of pure gold, and inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and turquoise. Its beauty was astounding, but it was also the moment when strange events began that gave rise to the myth of the Curse of the Pharaoh. A few months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon, the sponsor of the excavations, died suddenly in Cairo. He died after a small wound on his cheek became infected, and at the same time, the lights went out throughout the city. Newspapers quickly linked the tragedy to an ancient curse. His dog died soon after in London, on the same night that his master passed away. This was only the beginning of a series of strange deaths. Several other members of the expedition died under mysterious circumstances, some from illness, some from accidents. In all, more than 20 people connected with the excavations died over the course of a decade. Although Howard Carter himself lived a long life, skeptics could not dispel the feeling that the mask and the entire tomb were filled with dark forces. Locals claimed that the inscriptions in the tomb warned of death for anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's peace. Scientists tried to explain this phenomenon from a scientific point of view, suggesting that poisonous fungi or bacteria capable of causing fatal diseases could have been preserved inside the sarcophagus. However, no study has provided convincing evidence. The symbolism of the mask itself attracts special attention. It depicts the face of Tutankhamun with idealized features, but the eyes of the mask seem to look straight at the person, causing a feeling of anxiety. On the forehead are symbols of a cobra and a vulture, signs of divine power and protection. The ancient Egyptians believed that these symbols were capable of destroying any enemy of the pharaoh, even after his death. Thus, the mask was not just a decoration, but a powerful magical artifact designed to protect the ruler's soul in the afterlife. Over time, the mask became the subject of many mystical stories. Some researchers claim that every time it was transported from museum to museum, accidents occurred, plane breakdowns, crashes, or strange illnesses among those accompanying it. Even a modern restoration incident in 2014, when workers accidentally damaged the mask and clumsily glued back the fallen beard, sparked a wave of rumors that it was a sign of the pharaoh's wrath. Today, the mask is kept in the Cairo Museum, under heavy guard and in specially controlled conditions. Thousands of tourists come to see it with their own eyes, and each time there is a special silence in the room, as if people sense the presence of something more than just a work of art. Some see it as the pinnacle of ancient craftsmanship, others as a symbol of the greatness and tragedy of a young ruler. But there are those who still believe that something dangerous is hidden behind the golden features, and that ancient warnings should not be taken as empty legends. Tutankhamun's mask is more than just a historical relic. It is an artifact that continues to live its own life, shrouded in mystery and fear. It is a reminder that sometimes ancient civilizations left behind not just works of art, but objects with powers we don't fully understand. And perhaps that is why the mask remains one of the most cursed artifacts, best left alone. Mayan crystal skulls. Among the most mysterious archaeological finds of the 20th century, a special place is occupied by crystal skulls, which are attributed to the civilizations of Central America. These artifacts are made from solid pieces of quartz, carved with incredible precision, and are still the subject of heated debate among scientists and mystics. Legends claim that they have mystical powers, and touching them can bring both knowledge and healing, as well as death. The most famous was the so-called Mitchell Hedges skull, found in 1924 in Belize. It was discovered by the daughter of a British explorer when the setting sun caught the glitter of quartz from beneath the earth. The skull was so carefully polished that no trace of tools could be found under a microscope. The eye sockets contained special lenses that enhanced the light and created the illusion of movement, as if the skull itself was coming to life in the rays of fire. This gave rise to the opinion that it could not have been made with the primitive tools of antiquity, meaning that either the craftsman had unknown technologies or the artifact was of extraterrestrial origin. According to locals, the skull carries a curse. It is believed that it takes the lives of those who try to use its power for evil. Supporters of this version cite examples. Several researchers who took the skull from the temple without permission soon died under strange circumstances. Others have had accidents, lost their families, or fallen ill. Skeptics say these stories are all coincidences and hoaxes, but the chain of tragedies seems too consistent to dismiss. According to Mayan and Aztec mythology, there were 13 crystal skulls in total, and together they form a kind of library of knowledge. Legends say that if all the artifacts are collected and combined, humanity will learn the secret of its origins and future. But there are also darker interpretations, that combining the skulls will awaken an ancient force capable of wiping civilization off the face of the earth. Scientists have conducted numerous examinations. Some laboratories have concluded that the skulls could have been made using 19th century rotary tools, which would indicate a forgery. However, supporters of the mystical version point out, if this is so, then how can one explain the complete absence of traces of metal and the incredible symmetry, which cannot be repeated even by modern methods. Moreover, quartz has piezoelectric properties, and exposure to light and sound can actually create strange effects that the ancients may have perceived as supernatural. Crystal skulls are often associated with curses. Museum workers have been known to complain of nightmares and the feeling of being watched while the skull was in their rooms. Some claimed to hear whispers in its presence or see a shimmer in the eye sockets. In esoteric circles, it is believed that quartz is capable of storing information and memories, which means that skulls can be a kind of accumulator of knowledge of ancient civilizations, or even the gods themselves. Today, the Mitchell Hedges skull is kept in a private collection and is periodically shown to the public. Other specimens are in museums around the world, in Paris, London, Washington. But an aura of fear and admiration hovers around each of them. Some come to touch the secret, others to check whether the artifact will not pass on its destructive power to them. The history of the crystal skulls remains open. For some, they are clever fakes created for fame and money. For others, they are the remnants of knowledge from civilizations that disappeared long before the advent of writing. But, as with other cursed artifacts, the main thing is that man still cannot explain everything he saw. And perhaps this is where their true power lies. They make us remember that there are boundaries beyond which there is something more than just stone or quartz. Annabelle doll. Among all the modern artifacts associated with curses, the Annabelle doll occupies a special place. It does not belong to an ancient civilization and is not covered in thousand-year-old legends, but its story has become one of the most frightening in the 20th century. An ordinary toy at first glance turned into a symbol of evil, and its fame has become overgrown with such details that even today many prefer to stay away from it. Annabelle's story began in 1970 when a mother gave her college-age daughter a soft-shell doll, the then popular Raggedy Ann model. The girl, Donna, lived in a dorm with a friend and initially perceived the gift as an ordinary cute thing. But soon both girls noticed oddities. The doll changed position, sitting in different places in the room. Sometimes its arms and legs ended up in poses that could not be explained. Later, short phrases, as if written by a child's hand, began to appear on notes they found in the apartment. At first, it seemed like a game or someone's joke, but over time it became clear that something much darker was happening. Turning to a medium, the girls heard a story that the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle had died near their home and had allegedly entered a doll, seeking to find new friends. The students' gentleness and gullibility played a cruel joke. They decided to let the girl stay in the doll, believing that this would help her soul. But instead of friendship, a real nightmare entered their lives. Events quickly took on a menacing character. One of the girl's friends claimed that invisible hands had strangled him at night, leaving deep scratches on his body. Another time, a neighbor found a doll sitting right by the door, as if it were waiting to be let into the room. The air in the apartment became heavy. The residents began to have nightmares, and it soon became obvious that this was not a child's spirit, but a sinister entity that used the image of a little girl as a mask. In desperation, the girls turned to renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. After examining the doll and listening to the evidence, they stated that the toy contained not a child's spirit, but a demon seeking to possess a human soul. According to them, the doll was a kind of conduit through which evil tried to strengthen its presence in our world. The Warrens took Annabelle to their home, but even in their home, she remained dangerous. To limit her influence, the doll was placed in a special glass case, blessed by a priest and labeled with the words, "Warning, do not open." However, even in her display case, Annabelle continued to frighten visitors to the Warren Museum. There were stories of people mocking the doll, knocking on the glass, or trying to take pictures of her too closely. Some of them subsequently crashed, fell ill, or died mysteriously. One of the most famous stories involves a motorcyclist who laughingly challenged Annabelle to a test. On the way home, he crashed and died. Skeptics believe that Annabelle is the result of psychological projections and self-hypnosis. However, strange coincidences, the number of deaths and accidents have created an aura of horror around her. That is why the doll is never taken out of the museum without special rituals, and the staff tries to keep her isolated from any influences. Today, Annabelle remains one of the most famous cursed objects in the world. Her story has inspired dozens of films and books, but outside of Hollywood, she continues to exist as a real-life relic of evil. For some, she's just a scary fairy tale. For others, She's proof that evil can hide in even the most seemingly harmless things. The Annabelle doll reminds us that sometimes danger lurks where you least expect it, and perhaps that is why her story is so frightening. After all, no one is immune from encountering an object that can change life for the worse with just one touch. Doll Robert. If the story of Annabelle seems scary, then the story of the Roberta doll, kept in Florida, adds an even more sinister tone. This seemingly innocent toy, made in the early 20th century, has long since become a legend in American folklore. So many stories of misfortune have grown up around it that tourists today come to it with flowers, coins, and notes of apology, afraid of bringing a curse upon themselves. Robert's story began in 1904 when a boy named Eugene Otto, the son of a wealthy family from Key West, received an unusual gift. According to one version, the doll was given to him by his grandmother from Germany. According to another, it was given to him by one of the maids whom the family had recently fired. The toy itself was almost as tall as a child, dressed in a white sailor suit, and holding a small teddy bear in its hands. At first glance, it looked strange, but not sinister. However, soon Eugene's parents began to notice frightening changes. The boy began to talk to the doll, and soon voices began to be heard in the house. One childish and another low, adult, which there was no one to pronounce. Sometimes the parents would find Eugene's room turned upside down. Furniture moved, things scattered. When the adults asked the boy what had happened, he would always answer, "Robert did it." And over time, this phrase became almost a mantra, repeated by everyone who knew the history of the Otto family. Neighbors claimed to have seen the doll by the window when no one was in the house. Sometimes its facial expression changed, and its gaze followed passers-by. Children on the street were afraid to approach the house, and even adults avoided it. One day, the parents heard their son screaming, ran into his room, and found the boy pinned to the bed. Robert was sitting on a chair opposite, and it seemed that his glass eyes were shining in the darkness. When Eugene grew up and became a famous artist, he continued to keep the doll close by. In fact, he gave it a separate room in his house. His wife claimed that Robert influenced her husband, as if forcing him to obey. She repeatedly asked to get rid of the doll, but Eugene refused, explaining that it was part of his life. After his death in 1974, Robert remained in the house, and his heirs soon donated it to the Key West Historical Society Museum. It was there that the doll became a real sensation. Museum employees noticed that strange things were happening to her. She changed poses, quiet steps were heard, and sometimes cameras recorded movement in the hall. But most importantly, visitors began to complain. Those who dared to laugh at Robert or photograph him without permission soon encountered trouble. Accidents, illnesses, breakups. People began to return to the museum with letters of apology, which are now kept next to the doll. Thousands of such letters have become a kind of testimony to the power of the curse. Tourists write, "Forgive me, Robert, I did not mean to laugh. After visiting you, I lost my job, give it all back. I am sick, please rid me of the curse." Museum workers claim that new letters arrive every week. Even the most skeptical guests prefer to at least whisper, "Allow," before taking a photo of the doll. Scientists explain Robert's phenomenon by self-hypnosis and the effect of expectation. If a person believes that trouble will befall him, he begins to notice every little thing, perceiving it as a sign. However, it is difficult to explain why this effect is so stable for more than 100 years. Today, the doll sits in a glass case at the Fort East Martello Museum. Its appearance is still unsettling: faded naval attire, darkened fabric, glass eyes that seem to hold amusement. And while Robert has become a tourist attraction, many are convinced that his powers are real. This story reminds us that sometimes it doesn't matter whether an artifact is made for a game or a ritual. A true curse is born when fear and faith intertwine so tightly that they turn an ordinary object into a symbol of horror. Robert is just such an object, and his fame only grows with each passing year. Hope Diamond. Of all the cursed artifacts, the Hope Diamond is considered one of the most infamous. This deep blue stone has attracted the attention of kings, the rich and collectors for centuries, but each of its owners has faced a series of tragedies, misfortunes, and deaths. Over its long history, it has passed through the hands of monarchs, jewelers, and bankers, and its appearance has almost always been accompanied by disaster. The diamond's history dates back to the 17th century, when French adventurer Jean-Baptiste Tavernier brought it back from India. According to legend, the stone was carved from a statue of an Indian deity, and the very fact of sacrilege allegedly doomed it to a curse. Soon after Tavernier's return to France, his affairs went downhill. He was ruined, fled the country, and died in poverty. For his contemporaries, this was the first evidence that the diamond was cursed. Later, the stone ended up in the hands of the French king Louis XIV. It was cut and given the name French blue. The king wore it as a symbol of power, but his reign ended in serious illness and death. His heirs suffered an even more terrible fate. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette owned the stone during the French Revolution, and both ended their lives on the guillotine. For the people, this became a clear sign that the diamond does not bring power, but death. After the revolution, the stone disappeared, but a few decades later, it resurfaced in England. Jewelers tracked it down and recut it, reducing its size. Now, it has a new name, the Hope Diamond, after one of its owners, banker Henry Philip Hope. And although he himself lived a long life, his heirs were caught up in a series of bankruptcies and family scandals. Soon the stone migrated into the hands of other rich people, and each time the fate of the new owners was tragic. Some died prematurely, others lost their fortunes, and some committed suicide. The stone acquired a particularly sinister reputation in the early 20th century. When it was bought by American tycoon Evelyn Walsh McLean, she believed that she could turn the curse into good luck, and wore the diamond to social events, proud of its dark reputation. But soon, her life turned into a series of tragedies. First, her little daughter died, then her son died in a car accident, and her husband committed suicide. Evelyn herself lived to old age, but her last years were marred by illness and loneliness. After her death, the stone passed to jeweler Harry Winston, who donated it to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The Hope Diamond has been kept there ever since, displayed in a special display case. Many believe that the curse ended with the transfer of the stone to the museum. But there are those who claim that it still has dark power, but now it is no longer tied to one owner, but dispersed among the thousands of visitors who look at it every day. Scientists explain the diamond's sinister reputation by its rare beauty and unusual color. The blue hue is created by boron impurities in the crystal structure, which makes the stone unique and attracts special attention. And researchers tend to attribute the chain of tragedies to coincidences and the hard lives of people involved in big money and politics. But even they admit that the legends surrounding the stone have become so strong that they have turned it into an independent phenomenon where belief in a curse plays no less a role than the real story. Today, the Hope Diamond remains one of the Smithsonian's top attractions. Thousands of people from around the world come to gaze upon its eerie glow, many with a little trepidation. After all, no matter how skeptics try to explain its reputation, it's hard not to wonder, if this stone were just a beautiful crystal, could it have left such a mark on history? Perhaps behind its brilliance there really is a power that is best not to play with. Figurine of the idol of Zluqi. Among the cursed artifacts, a special place is occupied by a statuette known as the Idol of Zluqi. Its history begins at the beginning of the 20th century, when British archaeologists in one of the Syrian villages excavated a small temple complex, long abandoned and destroyed by time. Inside, among the rubble, they found a strange figurine carved from dark stone. It depicted a creature with a disproportionately large head, huge eyes, and a short, almost shapeless body. Despite the roughness of the forms, there was something disturbing and mesmerizing about the statuette's appearance, as if the gaze of the stone eyes pierced right through. According to local legends, this idol belonged to a tribe that worshipped a deity called Zluqi. It was believed to represent destruction, disease, and chaos. Villagers warned archaeologists not to take the statue, as anyone who dared to disturb its peace would bring disaster upon themselves. But the warnings were ignored. The artifact was sent to Europe, where it soon became the subject of debate in scientific circles. The first misfortunes were not long in coming. One of the archaeologists who took part in the expedition soon died in a car accident. Another became seriously ill and died a few months later from a rare infection. When the idol ended up in the private collection of a London antique dealer, fires and strange events began to occur in his house. Servants refused to stay overnight, claiming to hear whispers and sense someone's presence. The antique dealer himself soon died of a heart attack, and the statuette was sold at auction. Thus began its dark history in Europe. Each new owner faced tragedies. Someone lost their family, someone lost their business, and some died a sudden death. The press called the artifact the idol of misfortune, but among mystics it became known as the idol of evil. They believed that the statue was connected to ancient rituals to summon forces that could not be controlled. In its crude form, they saw not just the image of a deity, but a vessel for dark energy that had survived through the centuries. In the 1970s, the idol ended up in a museum in Edinburgh. The management decided to display it in a room with other Middle Eastern artifacts. But after that, employees began to complain of nightmares, anxiety, and sudden panic attacks. Several people quit their jobs, unable to withstand the pressure. Visitors also reported feeling dizzy, weak, and fearful when near the statuette. One man even fainted right in front of the display case. Scientists have tried to find an explanation for these phenomena. Some have talked about suggestion. If a person heard stories about a curse in advance, their subconscious could cause physical reactions. Others have suggested the presence of toxic substances on the surface of the stone, preserved since the burial, but no study has given a definitive answer. Over time, the museum decided to remove the artifact from the permanent exhibition and store it in a closed collection. Today, access to it is limited, and its location is known only to a small circle of specialists. Nevertheless, the legend lives on. Mystics believe that the idol has not lost its power, but is simply waiting for a new person who will dare to disturb its peace. The story of the Zluqi idol is an example of how even a small object can carry a long trail of tragedy and mystery. For some, these are just coincidences. For others, proof that some artifacts do indeed possess dark energy. And perhaps that is why archaeologists are still debating whether to extract from the earth everything that ancient civilizations left behind, or whether some finds are better left alone. Fossilized monkey hand from India. Collections of cursed artifacts often include items whose origins are surrounded by dark legends. One such object is the so-called petrified monkey hand, found in India at the beginning of the 20th century by British colonial explorers. At first glance, it was just a strange bone, resembling a primate's hand, partially mineralized and covered in cracks. But its story quickly went beyond archaeology and became a veritable legend about a curse. According to legend, the hand belonged not to an ordinary monkey, but to a sacred creature, possibly associated with the cult of the god Hanuman. Some Indian texts mention body parts that turned to stone after the death of great beings and retained their power. Locals warned Europeans not to touch the find. The hand was considered cursed and could bring misfortune to anyone who tried to take possession of it. But the British, driven by a thirst for collecting, took it out of India. The first owner of the artifact was a British Army officer. His fate was tragic. A few months after returning to London, he died under strange circumstances. He fell down the stairs of his own house. After his death, the hand ended up in the hands of one of his relatives, who soon went broke and died of illness. Thus began a chain of misfortunes that forever cemented the discovery's sinister reputation. The artifact soon attracted the attention of occultists. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, interest in mysticism grew in Europe, and many believed that the petrified hand had magical powers. Some claimed that it could fulfill wishes, others that it was an instrument of dark forces that demanded a sacrifice for every request. Several sessions conducted using the hand ended with frightening results. Participants began to hallucinate. Some claimed to hear an animal roar, and others complained of nightmares in which a living hand reached out to them. The story gained particular notoriety after a British writer used it as inspiration for a mystical story about the monkey's paw, where the object grants wishes, but each of them turns into a tragedy. The literary version only increased interest in the real artifact, and many sought confirmation that it was the one that inspired the author. In the mid-20th century, the hand found its way into a private collection in London, where it was shown to select guests. But even there, it brought misfortune. Several owners complained of a series of disasters: house fires, sudden illnesses, broken families. Finally, tired of the curse, the heirs of the last owner gave the artifact to a museum, where it remains to this day in closed collections, away from the public. Scientists tried to study the find. Analysis showed that it really is a fossilized primate bone, probably a macaque, which could be thousands of years old. But no one could explain the series of coincidences on a scientific basis. Skeptics claim that the tragedies are connected with suggestion and superstition, and believers in mysticism insist that the hand contains a dark force that feeds on the energy of people. Today, the fossilized monkey hand remains a mystery, It is almost never displayed in public, but rumors of its existence continue to live on. Tourists and researchers visiting London are as interested in it as they are in other exhibits. And every time the conversation turns to it, the same question arises. Is it worth preserving such objects at all if they can only bring suffering? This story reminds us that sometimes the most inconspicuous artifacts carry more horror than the greatest treasures. Perhaps precisely because their power lies not in wealth or beauty, but in an ancient curse, the essence of which is still unclear to us. Painting Crying Boy. In the history of cursed objects, there is rarely an artifact as widely known as the painting The Crying Boy. Its reproductions adorned thousands of homes in Great Britain and Europe in the second half of the 20th century, and this is what made it one of the most discussed urban legends. It would seem that the harmless portrait of a child, painted by an unknown artist, could not pose a danger. But hundreds of coincidences and tragedies turned it into a symbol of a real curse. The painting depicts a boy with a sad expression, large eyes, and tears glistening on his cheeks. The child's gaze seemed so sad and piercing that many people felt uneasy when they saw the portrait. Despite this, reproductions of the painting were sold en masse in the 1950s to 1970s. They were bought by millions of people, and it was the mass production that allowed people to notice a repeating pattern of strange events. In the 1980s, British newspapers began publishing stories about a series of fires in which the Crying Boy painting was always present. Houses would burn to the ground, but reproductions of the portrait would be found almost intact in the ashes. Firefighters repeatedly testified that this particular painting somehow resisted the fire, even though nothing but charred ruins remained around. The newspapers picked up on the sensation, and rumors of a curse spread quickly. People said that after buying the painting, misfortunes began to appear in their homes. Family quarrels, illnesses, financial problems, and sometimes fires. Some claimed to hear crying at night or to feel the boy's gaze following them from corner to corner of the room. The stories multiplied, and more people tried to get rid of the paintings, believing that they brought misfortune. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1985, when the Sun newspaper published an article about a fire in Yorkshire. A family lost their home, but in the rubble, firefighters found a painting of the Crying Boy, completely undamaged. Soon the editorial office received hundreds of letters from readers with similar stories. The newspaper even organized an action. Anyone who wanted to get rid of the painting could bring it to the editorial office, and there they would organize a symbolic burning. However, even this act gave rise to rumors. They said that the flames barely gave in, as if the painting was resisting destruction. Skeptics tried to find rational explanations. Some claimed that the reproductions were printed on special fire-resistant paper, or covered with a protective varnish, which allowed them to survive fires. Others said that mass distribution simply increased the chance of coincidences. If millions of families had the painting, it was no wonder that some of them had experienced misfortune. But for many, such explanations were unconvincing because the coincidences were too numerous. Some researchers put forward darker versions. According to one, the boy depicted in the painting was an orphan who died in a fire, and his spirit continued to live in the image. According to another, the artist made a dark pact so that the painting would bring success in sales, but in exchange it carried a curse. These versions could not be proven, but they only increased the aura of horror. Today, the original painting and its copies can be found in collections and at flea markets. People still treat it with caution. Some buy the portrait as a curiosity and a symbol of the legend, while others avoid even looking at it. Despite the decades, the story of the Crying Boy remains one of the most persistent mystical legends in Europe. This story reminds us that curses are not always associated with ancient artifacts or occult objects. Sometimes one image is enough for the imagination of millions of people to turn it into a symbol of horror, and perhaps it is the belief that an object brings misfortune that makes it truly dangerous. The Pollock Tomb in Ireland. In the green hills of Ireland, where ancient legends intertwine with Christian lore, stands a forgotten tomb, known to the people as the Pollock Tomb. It looks like an ordinary old tomb made of gray stone, surrounded by moss and tall grasses. But among the locals, there is a belief that this tomb carries a curse that cannot be removed. The story begins in the 17th century, when the Pollock family, originally from Scotland, settled in Ireland. They were wealthy landowners and quickly gained power and influence. However, their success was cloaked in brutality. Chronicles mention bitter conflicts with peasants, deceptions, and even mysterious disappearances associated with the Pollock estate. Rumors of the family's dark dealings bolstered their reputation, and soon locals began to say that the family was cursed. When the first representative of the family was buried in the family tomb, strange things began almost immediately. Flickering lights were noticed in the cemetery, as if torches were burning inside the crypt, although the entrance was sealed. Sometimes groans and whispers were heard, and peasants said that at night the doors of the tomb seemed to open by themselves. Every time another Pollock was buried in the crypt, tragedies occurred in the area: fires, death of cattle, diseases. The most famous case was a burial in the late 18th century. The body of one of the family heirs was brought into the crypt, and a few weeks later, several people in the village died of a strange fever. The locals were convinced that the disease had come from the tomb. After that, the peasants refused to go near the crypt, and the cemetery was gradually abandoned. In the 19th century, explorers tried to open the tomb to verify the rumors, but everyone who took part in this venture encountered disasters. One archaeologist died on the way, another fell ill and died, and a third returned from the expedition in complete despair, claiming that he saw something inside that he could not describe in words. According to him, the air in the crypt was heavy, and it seemed as if invisible hands were trying to push him out. The legends about the Pollock tomb still live on. Some locals say they have seen ghostly figures near the tomb. Others claim that it is impossible to photograph the crypt. The pictures come out blurry or damaged. There are also those who are sure that the curse is connected with the oaths and crimes of the Pollock family, and their souls do not find peace, holding the crypt under their power. Scientists, of course, are skeptical of these stories. They explain them away as suggestion, coincidence, or natural phenomena. For example, the phosphorescence of marsh gases, which could create the illusion of lights. But for locals, these explanations are irrelevant. For them, the tomb remains a place where the past still influences the present. Today, the Pollock's tomb is closed and overgrown with vegetation. Tourists rarely get to this place, and even the brave ones try not to linger near the crypt for long. It is believed that touching the stones of the tomb can bring misfortune, and even more so, an attempt to get inside. The Pollock tomb is a reminder that sometimes a curse is more than just a myth or a fiction. It is a collection of memory, fear, and belief that is passed down from generation to generation, making one forgotten crypt a symbol of eternal punishment. And as long as the stone walls stand, the legend of the dark tomb lives on, frightening and enchanting those who dare to approach. Book of the Dead. Among all the ancient Egyptian artifacts, the Book of the Dead occupies a special place. It is not a single volume, but a collection of spells, hymns, and ritual texts that were written on papyrus and placed in tombs along with the dead. The purpose of the book was to help the soul overcome the dangers of the afterlife and achieve eternal life. But behind this sacred function lies a dark reputation. Many believe that the Book of the Dead carries a curse. Each copy of the book is unique. The priests created scrolls to order, inscribing spells suitable for a specific person. They describe the soul's journey through Duat, the realm of the dead, full of monsters, traps, and trials. In these texts, one can find scenes of the judgment of Osiris, where the heart of the deceased is weighed on scales against the feather of the goddess Mot. If the heart was heavier, the soul was devoured by the monster Ammit. But if the texts were pronounced correctly, the person received a chance at immortality. The problem was that these texts weren't just poetry. The ancient Egyptians considered them to be actual magical formulas. They believed that any mispronunciation or violation of the ritual order could cause disaster. This is why many archaeologists who first held the papyri of the Book of the Dead in their hands reported strange sensations. Some began to have nightmares. Others said that they heard voices or felt cold breath in the empty halls of museums. The most horrific stories are connected with excavations of the 19th and early 20th centuries. British archaeologists who took papyri to London often died shortly after the expeditions or fell seriously ill. The press immediately linked these deaths with the curse of the pharaohs. One of the most famous cases occurred in the 1930s, when a collector brought part of the Book of the Dead from Thebes to England. Soon after, his house burned down, he himself died in the fire, and the scrolls miraculously remained untouched. After this, many believe that the book protects itself and punishes those who disturb its peace. Today, several dozen copies of the Book of the Dead are kept in the British Museum and other major collections around the world. scholars continue to translate and study the texts, trying to understand how exactly they were used. But even among specialists, special respect and caution remain. Few dare to touch the papyri without gloves and ritual preparation. Skeptics explain the legends of curses by poisonous fungal spores preserved in ancient tombs. If they got into the lungs, they could cause serious illnesses, which became the cause of the deaths of researchers. But for many people, such explanations sound too rational because the chain of tragic coincidences is too long to ignore. The Book of the Dead is a reminder that the line between religion, magic, and history in the ancient world was thin. For the Egyptians, it was a tool for saving the soul. For archaeologists and collectors, it was a dangerous artifact. For modern people, it is a symbol that not all knowledge is meant for thoughtless use. And perhaps this is what makes the Book of the Dead one of the most feared cursed artifacts. It is created for protection, but for those who try to profit from it or violate its purpose, it can turn into a source of disaster. Voynich manuscript. Among the most mysterious books in human history, the Voynich manuscript occupies a special place. It is a thick codex of more than 200 pages, full of incomprehensible symbols, strange illustrations, and text written in an unknown language. Since its discovery in the early 20th century, scientists, cryptographers, and historians have puzzled over what its pages hide. But along with its scientific interest, the manuscript has acquired a dark reputation. Many believe it is cursed. The manuscript got its name from the antiquarian Wilfrid Voynich, who acquired it in 1912 in Italy. Even then, the book looked as if it came from another world. On the pages are images of plants that do not exist in nature, strange astronomical diagrams, figures of naked women immersed in mysterious liquids. The entire text is written in a language unlike any known language. Thousands of symbols repeat with a certain logic, but no decipherer has been able to find the key. The researchers' first impressions of the book were often disturbing. Many reported strange sensations while reading, as if the pages resisted their gaze. Some even claimed that after working with the manuscript for a long time, they had nightmares. Unknown creatures, stars falling from the sky, and figures reaching out to them. All this quickly gave rise to rumors that the book carried not only secret knowledge, but also a curse. Legends claim that the manuscript belonged to alchemists or magicians who used it as a grimoire, a book of spells. According to one version, the text is encrypted in such a way that a person without preparation will not be able to read it, otherwise the knowledge will destroy his mind. According to another, this is a book with predictions of the end of the world, and its deciphering will bring death to humanity. There are also real tragic coincidences. Wilfrid Voynich, who discovered the manuscript, tried to sell it as a sensation, but failed. He soon fell ill and died. His wife Ethel was never able to finish his work. Several researchers who devoted their lives to trying to decipher it ended it in despair, losing their health or dying in poverty. Each new owner of the book seemed to face personal misfortunes, which strengthened the belief in its curse. Scientists, of course, are trying to find rational explanations. Some believe the manuscript is an elaborate 15th century hoax created to impress a wealthy patron. Others believe it is an encrypted medical treatise or alchemy textbook. Radiocarbon dating of the parchment has shown that it dates back to the early 15th century, adding to the mystery. If it is a forgery, it is incredibly old. However, the main question remains: why has the text remained undecipherable? Even the best cryptographers, including experts who worked on ciphers from the World Wars, have failed to find the key. Modern machine learning algorithms have also failed. It seems that the text is either intentionally written in an artificial language or encrypted using a method that is still unknown. Today, the manuscript is kept in the Yale University Library. It has been digitized, and anyone can view its pages online. But this has only increased interest and anxiety. Some users claim that looking at the illustrations for too long is dangerous. They cause strange visions or dizziness. There are stories online of people claiming that even copies of the book bring misfortune. The Voynich manuscript is an example of an artifact in which science and myth are so intertwined that they cannot be separated. It may be nothing more than an intricate man-made mystery, but thousands of people around the world believe that a dark power is hidden within its pages. And it is this belief that makes it one of the most cursed artifacts in history. Grand Grimoire. Among the most sinister artifacts associated with curses, a special place is occupied by the legendary Black Book of the Vatican, better known as the Grand Grimoire. It is called the Gospel of Satan, the Red Dragon, and the Book of Forbidden Rituals. Legend has it that this is an ancient manuscript written in the late 15th or early 16th century that supposedly contains instructions on how to summon demons and make a pact with the devil himself. Many believe that the original is kept in the Vatican's secret archives and will never be shown to the public. The Grand Grimoire is believed to have been created in France or Italy by a man who had knowledge of both Kabbalah and alchemy. The text of the book is said to be divided into two parts. The first describes complex spells, diagrams, and symbols designed to open the gates to the spirit world. The second part contains instructions on how to make a contract with Lucifer, promising a soul in exchange for power, wealth, or secret knowledge. This alone makes the book a terrifying subject for any believer, and for mystical researchers, a symbol of the forbidden. For centuries, copies and fragments of the Grand Grimoire circulated among occultists and sorcerers. It was associated with the emergence of secret societies and black masses. Legends claim that anyone who tried to use the text literally faced a tragic ending. There are stories of magicians who went mad after rituals, people who disappeared while trying to open the gates, and even sudden fires that destroyed the homes of the book's owners. The manuscript gained particular notoriety in the 19th century, when several copies ended up in Paris. They were used by members of secret orders, and it was then that the dark reputation of the most cursed book in Europe began. There were rumors that even simply reading the text could cause nightmares, voices, or visions. The Vatican was actively hunting for copies during this period and confiscating them to prevent their distribution. This is why many believe that the real Grand Grimoire is kept there, in the closed rooms of the archive where the most dangerous books in the world are kept. Skeptics claim that the book is just a collection of medieval spells and superstitions, no more dangerous than any other occult text. However, it is precisely the number of tragedies associated with its mention that makes it seem different. Even today, occultists consider the Grand Grimoire too dangerous for practice, preferring to study it only theoretically. There is a belief that the book seems to be alive. Those who encountered copies of it described a feeling of heaviness and coldness emanating from the pages. Some claimed that the letters sometimes changed shape or disappeared, and the drawings of demons seemed to come to life in the candlelight. Such stories are difficult to verify, but they only increase the fear of the manuscript. Today, the original, if it exists, remains inaccessible. The Vatican has never confirmed or denied rumors of its existence, but the secret only cements the book's reputation as one of history's most cursed artifacts. After all, if it were harmless, why keep it a secret? The Grand Grimoire has become a symbol of forbidden knowledge, something that a person wants to know, but which is better never to touch. For some, it is just a myth; for others, a real threat, hidden from human eyes. And this is what makes it one of the most frightening relics. No one can say for sure where the legend ends and the truth begins. Ark of the Covenant. Among all the biblical artifacts, the Ark of the Covenant is considered one of the most mysterious and at the same time the most dangerous. According to the Old Testament, it was created on the instructions of Moses during the Exodus from Egypt. It was a wooden box covered with gold, inside which were kept the tablets with the 10 Commandments, Aaron's staff, and a vessel with manna from heaven. On the cover of the ark towered 2 golden cherubs, their wings converging, forming the throne of the Lord. The ark was believed to be more than just a repository of relics, but an instrument of divine power. It accompanied the Israelites on their campaigns and, according to legend, struck down enemies with lightning and fire. When the priests carried it around the walls of Jericho, the fortress fell without a fight. But at the same time, the ark was considered mortally dangerous for those who approached it without permission. The Bible describes an incident where one of the soldiers, having touched the ark, instantly fell dead. Over the centuries, the fate of the artifact has become increasingly mysterious. After the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in the 6th century BCE, it disappeared from the records. Where the ark is today is one of the biggest questions in the history of religion and archaeology. Legends of the curse of the ark spread throughout the world. In the Middle Ages, it was believed that it was capable of causing epidemics and wars. There are stories of warriors who tried to capture it and soon died in battle. Even in our time, archaeologists who tried to find traces of the ark encountered mystical events. Some fell ill, others got into accidents, and still others died under strange circumstances. One of the most popular legends is that the Ark was hidden in Ethiopia and is still kept in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the city of Axum. There is a special tradition there. One monk is appointed as the keeper of the Ark and dedicates his entire life to it. This man never leaves the church grounds and lives in isolation, protecting the shrine from prying eyes. The Ark is not shown to outsiders, but the belief that it is really there is passed down from generation to generation. Scholars, of course, treat these stories with caution. Some believe the Ark may have been destroyed or taken to Egypt, where it disappeared forever. Others suggest that it never existed as a physical object, but was merely a symbol of a divine presence. But for believers, the Ark remains a reality and a source of both hope and fear. What makes it a cursed artifact? It's not just the biblical stories of death by touch. The very fact that the Ark symbolized absolute power and strength made it an object of struggle. The owner of the Ark was considered invincible, and so each generation tried to take possession of it. But each time it turned into disaster. Legends claim that many armies that sought the Ark suffered catastrophic defeats, as if the relic itself did not allow anyone to possess it for long. Today, the Ark of the Covenant has become an integral part of world culture. It inspires films, books, and research, but its real history remains shrouded in mystery. Perhaps it rests in an abandoned cave, hidden forever. Or perhaps it really is guarded by monks in Ethiopia. The Ark of the Covenant is a symbol not only of faith, but also of the danger that comes with the desire to touch the forbidden. It reminds us that there is knowledge and power that a person is better off not touching, no matter how much he strives for it. And perhaps this is the true curse of the Ark. It always beckons to itself, but brings death to those who try to take possession of it. The cursed altar of the Kalahari. In the heart of Africa's Kalahari Desert, among endless sands and rare oases, lies one of the continent's most sinister legends. It concerns the so-called cursed altar of the Kalahari, a place that local tribes have avoided for generations. It looks like just a circle of stones arranged in a strange shape, but for centuries there have been stories about victims, disappearances, and unexplained phenomena circulating around it. According to legend, the altar was built long before the arrival of Europeans, possibly in prehistoric times. It is believed that it served as a place for rituals associated with the worship of the forces of the desert and the spirits of ancestors. Some researchers suggest that it may have been an astronomical object or a sanctuary for fertility rites. But the legends tell of something else, of bloody sacrifices made on the altar, and of a curse that fell upon those who dared to disturb its peace. The first Europeans to encounter this mystery were missionaries in the 19th century. They heard stories from the Bushmen about a place where the earth breathes death. According to the locals, people who approached the altar soon died, some from diseases, some from sudden accidents. One of the missionaries wrote in his diary that, while trying to explore the circle of stones, his companions began to hear strange sounds. A hum, similar to low singing, although there was complete silence around. That same night, one of the explorers died of a sudden heart attack. In the 20th century, several expeditions attempted to study the altar. In the 1930s, South African archaeologists reported that the stones emitted unusual heat, even though the desert temperature dropped to freezing at night. In the 1960s, a team of geologists recorded instrument failures as they approached the circle. Their compasses spun non-stop, and their radios lost signal. Afterwards, 2 members of the expedition mysteriously disappeared without a trace, and their bodies were never found. These incidents reinforced the belief that the altar was indeed connected to dark forces. Local legends attribute to the altar the ability to take those who show disrespect. Strange balls of light are said to have been seen in the desert, hovering over the rocks, and sometimes screams have been heard coming from underground. Elders are convinced that these are the voices of victims made in ancient times, and that their souls are forever bound to the altar. Scientists, of course, try to explain the phenomenon rationally. They suggest that there may be a deposit of magnetic ores in this area that causes instrument failures. Some talk about underground gases that can affect people's health and psyche. But even the most rational researchers admit that the number of tragedies associated with this place is too great to write everything off as coincidences. Today, the Kalahari Cursed Altar is not officially listed in any archaeological registry. Its exact location is hidden, and many expeditions attempting to find it have ended in failure. Tourists who have heard of the legend sometimes go looking for it, but almost always return empty-handed, reporting only strange sensations, heaviness in the air, sudden fatigue and anxiety, as if the desert itself were repelling intruders. The Kalahari altar remains a symbol that some places on Earth hold memories of rituals too dark for our understanding. Perhaps it is linked to an ancient culture that has long since disappeared, leaving behind only broken stones. Or perhaps it is truly a point where the world of the living meets the world of the dead. For some, it's just a myth, but for others, it's a reality best left unexplored. And until its mystery is solved, the Kalahari Cursed Altar remains one of the world's most terrifying artifacts, a symbol of the forbidden, and a reminder that some places on Earth are best avoided. Tomb of Cleopatra. Among the most discussed archaeological mysteries of the world, a special place is occupied by the lost tomb of Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt. Her name is shrouded in legends. Her life is full of intrigue, love, and politics, but even more myths are associated with her death. Where Cleopatra lies is a question that has tormented historians and archaeologists for more than 2,000 years, and many stories about a curse are associated with this search. According to ancient sources, Cleopatra died in 30 BC when Egypt fell to Rome. It is believed that she committed suicide by being bitten by a snake, although some researchers suspect that her death may have been murder. The historian Plutarch wrote that the queen's body was buried with her lover, Mark Antony, with royal honors, but the exact burial place is still unknown. Over the centuries of searching, many hypotheses have been put forward. Some claim that the tomb is in Alexandria, in an area now submerged by the Mediterranean Sea. Others suggest that it was hidden in Taposiris Magna, a temple complex 40 kilometers from the city. Excavations there in recent decades have uncovered many Ptolemaic-era artifacts, including statues, coins depicting Cleopatra, and sarcophagi of priests. But the queen herself has not yet been found. The tomb is also associated with dark legends. Local residents have long believed that the burial site is guarded by spirits and spells, and anyone who tries to open it is doomed to die. Rumors of a Cleopatra curse are reminiscent of the legends of Tutankhamun. Several archaeologists involved in the search are said to have died soon after from illness or accidents. In the 1920s, one explorer died in a car accident a few weeks into the expedition, while another suddenly fell ill and died of a fever. These stories have given rise to the belief that the queen herself cast a spell on her tomb. It is believed that she wanted her tomb to remain a secret place forever, and any attempts to open it are therefore doomed to failure. Some Egyptian archaeologists openly admit that they fear that even if the tomb is found, opening it could lead to tragedy. Skeptics, of course, explain everything by coincidences. They point out that archaeological expeditions are always associated with risk. Illness, heat, accidents are inevitable. But the mystical aura is too strong, and each new death only strengthens the legend. Cleopatra's symbolism is particularly noteworthy. She was considered the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, patroness of magic and the afterlife. If she really wanted her death to be a mystical act, it is quite possible that her tomb was arranged as a sanctuary, protected by rituals. In ancient Egyptian culture, such protective curses were commonplace. Texts on the walls of tombs often promised a terrible fate to anyone who dared to disturb the peace of the deceased. Today, the search for Cleopatra's tomb continues. In recent years, archaeologists have increasingly turned their attention to the flooded ruins of Alexandria. Statues of pharaohs, sphinxes, and even fragments of temples have been found underwater, which gives hope that one day the entrance to the tomb may be discovered there. But as long as the tomb remains undiscovered, it is not only an archaeological mystery, but also a symbol of a curse, a reminder that some ancient secrets may resist discovery. Cleopatra's tomb continues to attract researchers from all over the world. For some, it is the key to understanding the last days of Egypt. For others, it is a symbol of forbidden knowledge, and while its doors are not opened, the legend lives on, frightening and fascinating, and the queen herself remains the eternal keeper of her secret. Golden Inca Statue, El Dorado. Among the legends of cursed treasures, a special place is occupied by the story of the golden statue associated with the myth of El Dorado. Its existence is still in question, but stories about it have excited the imagination for centuries. According to legend, the statue was created by the Incas or their predecessors and symbolized the deity of the sun. She was nearly as tall as a human and was completely covered in gold plates. Her eyes were said to be made of emeralds that glowed in the dark. Europeans first heard of it in the 16th century when the conquistadors arrived in South America. Legend claimed that in the heart of the jungle, there was a city where the ruler made sacrifices to the gods every year by covering his body in gold powder and plunging into the lake, giving the treasures to the water. But the main object of worship was the golden statue that stood in the center of the temple. Anyone who dared to look into its eyes without the ritual was supposedly condemned to death. Expeditions sent in search of El Dorado invariably ended in tragedy. Entire detachments perished from disease, attacks, and hunger. But what is striking is that those who claimed to have seen the golden statue soon suffered a terrible fate. One of the officers who described it in a letter home was found dead a few days later, his body looking as if he had died in agony. Another explorer who claimed to have touched the statue soon went mad. Local tribes warned that the statue was cursed and guarded by spirits. They said that when the Spaniards tried to approach the sanctuary, earthquakes and storms began. According to them, the statue was not just a symbol, it contained the power of the sun itself, and this power was not intended for foreigners. In the 17th century, there were rumors that some of the Spaniards managed to take the statue out. Their ship allegedly set sail for Europe, but was destroyed by a storm, and the treasure sank to the bottom of the ocean. Since then, many treasure hunters have tried to find traces of it, but each time they have only encountered disaster. In the 20th century, several expeditions died in the jungle under mysterious circumstances. Some died from snake bites, others from strange infections that doctors could not explain. Scientists tend to consider the story of the statue a myth, created from a mixture of legends about Inca rituals and fantasies of the conquistadors. However, archaeologists have indeed found gold figurines and objects associated with the cults of the sun and moon. These finds confirm that belief in the power of metals and jewelry was a key part of the religious life of the Incas. And although the complete statue has never been found, its image lives on in memory. Supporters of mystical theories are convinced that the statue exists and is still hidden in one of the lost temples. According to them, it is protected not only by the physical barriers of the jungle, but also by an invisible force. That is why no expedition has been able to reach it. Today, El Dorado and its golden statue remain a symbol of human greed and the tragedies caused by the desire to obtain the forbidden. For some, it is an archaeological mystery. For others, proof that ancient treasures can be not just wealth, but a real curse. After all, history shows that everyone who tried to find this statue paid too high a price. The golden statue of El Dorado is not only a myth of untold riches, but also a reminder that greed and the desire for power always lead to destruction. And perhaps that is why it was never found. It remains in the jungle as a warning to humanity. These artifacts have survived centuries and empires, witnessing the fall and rise of civilizations. But despite the passage of time, their secrets remain behind closed doors. Curses, legends, and strange coincidences live on, reminding us that the answer is still hidden in the darkness.